Good afternoon, it's Ross Wilson. I'm a certified crop advisor with the Ausable Bayfield Conservation Authority. This is a video recording of our annual cover crop workshop that we hold annually on the last Friday in January in Clinton. This year obviously is going to be a digital format, and it was an abbreviated version of it. One of the presentations was not recorded, so I'm going to record this now for the folks who were not able to attend it. Snowy day that day, and a lot of guys were moving snow. So here we go. I'm going to start with sharing my screen. So this is the original agenda for the day. Involved some welcome rules of conduct. Every year that we want to talk about some seed issues. So Joel Begg this year was good enough to provide some input. What I'm really going to focus on in this video is the cover crop and the 60-inch corn trial, and then leave it at that. There are two other National Cover Crop Summit videos. I'm going to provide a link to them later on, but those are the two gentlemen who we replayed their videos. So I'll just move right along. We want to talk about cover crops and 60-inch corn. We had some general objectives. We really wanted to just see how easy it was, what some of the challenges were associated with growing 60-inch corn to begin with, and then getting cover crops established within that. We wanted to focus on those folks with their existing equipment and practices. We weren't about to try something new. There was no new equipment purchases. There wasn't even really equipment modifications. So this is something that we wanted to at least give it a try. Keep in mind that this is not a research project with firm conclusions. It wasn't a replicated trial, so it does not have the statistical rigor that you would expect from a more rigorous, statistically designed project. However, we did want to identify what were some of the key issues that were needed to be considered moving forward. If you want to move this concept along, what are some of the key information that you need to know and be aware of? One of the things that we found out after we got into this particular 60-inch corn business was no matter how you looked at it, no matter how you did it, it always looked like there was something wrong with your planter. Either it was skipping rows or planting too many in the same rows. We had two trials that we were aware of. The one on the left is a twin. It was seeded not with a twin row planter, but a 30-inch row, and we actually planted it twice, moved over 7 inches and planted it the second time. To get some of the advantages of a twin row, essentially the twin row will give you access to just that much, a little more extra soil matrix for water and nutrient assimilation. The one on the right was a single row 60-inch. And those plants are very tightly spaced, about 3 inches, a little over 3 inches apart to get the desired population. So we'll move ahead. So the two trials, I'm going to break them down, just give you a little bit of details about each particular one. The single row trial population in field ended up being 33,000 per acre, which was the target population. Herbicide program involves some Promextra, PPI, and then at the 3-leaf stage or the V3 stage, we come back in with some Clista. One of the things that you got to be concerned about, particularly with this herbicides, is what kind of half-life that they have. And depending on when you plan to seed your cover crop, that may be an issue, but it may not be an issue. Just something to be aware of. Nitrogen was put on 70 pounds of manure in the fall, finishing hog manure. 110 pounds of actual and put on PPI in the spring, both broadcast. So that'll have some implications for that trial as well as the other trial, which was broadcast also. And I'll just touch lightly on what implications that might have. Single row, the cover crop establishment was very simple, just done with an ATV spreader at the V6 stage. It was put on a little heavy at 40 pounds, primarily because with the ATV just spreading it, broadcasting it, leaving it on the surface, germination is usually reduced, and so you want to accommodate, try to keep your population, cover crop population high, and account for those losses that lack of germination. However, it was dominantly annual ryegrass that was used. The other trial was the twin row, ended up with 17,000 as the per acre population. That was not the target population. The target population was the same, 33, 34,000. We had some mix up in terms of actually getting the planter set up right and how we used it in terms of planting the rows twice. What I learned from that was, despite your best efforts, it's probably important to plant 100 feet, get off the tractor, go out and make sure that you've got your seed population that you need to make sure that you're actually getting where you need to go. So with the 60-inch corn, because you're actually missing every other row, you got to plant at 66,000 plants per acre if you want to hit that 33 per acre final population. A little bit different herbicide program. They went with glyphosate pre-plant, and then just before we planted the cover crop, another round of glyphosate. Nitrogen in that particular case was broadcast PPI, and there was 200 pounds of nitrogen in there as well. One of the reasons that we went with establishing the cover crop with a drill instead of just a spreader. Spreader is very simple, very easy, but germination is more of an issue. We wanted, because the primary goal of 60-inch corn going to a 60-inch format was to get good cover crop establishment. And it was believed that drilling it in was going to be a higher success rate than just spreading it on the surface. That was done at V4 to try to minimize the amount of damage to the corn. Talk about that a little bit later. And again, the seed mix was dominantly annual ryegrass with two different rates, a 35 rate and a 70 rate. The thinking with the 70 rate was, if 35 is good, then 70 must be much better, right? So something to keep in mind. One of the things that I need to bring up right now is just to give you folks some indication of what the rainfall was. As you all know, water is the primary nutrient that's required in the highest amounts. This is a graph of the growing season. You can't see really the numbers on it. It'll be too small, but the red line there is the 1-inch mark of rain. So right through from May through September, you can see that we got a beautiful distribution of rain. Every week almost, we got some rain. We totaled up to about 1 to 2 inches of rain each month, and it ended up being just a beautiful, beautiful distribution of rain. That has particular impacts for when you interpret the results. If we had a very dry year, the 60-inch corn might be much more of a challenge, and I'll deal with that shortly. This was an example photo of the 60-inch corn. We were able, in both cases, to get a good establishment of corn. We were able to get a good establishment of the cover crop. However, it looked quite different in each particular case. So on the left here, one of the things that really jumped out at me was the influence of the competition of the plants. So those plants are 3 inches apart, and you can see the various colors of soil there. It's darker right in the middle, and then right up against within about 20 inches of the corn row, it's quite a bit lighter. So the way I interpret that to mean that those roots are sucking the moisture out of that 20-inch zone, but they can't reach into the soil in the middle of the row. If it was 30-inch, they would cover it all, but because they're 60-inch, there's a section there in the middle where the roots just cannot access moisture. And in a dry year, that might be a killer thing. This year, it happened to be okay. Second implication is with regards to nitrogen. So if some of that nitrogen is going along with the water, then there's probably a zone right there in the middle of the row where nitrogen, because it was broadcast, was being not utilized by the corn crop. And adjacent to the corn row, then it would probably do a great job of pulling the moisture and the nitrogen into the corn. You can see it's a very, very distinct line on the right-hand photo, very distinct line. Photos don't do it justice, but you can see on that, the right-hand side, it's a very, very clear line where the roots were able to pull moisture and where they were not able to pull moisture from. Again, both cases, we were able to get a decent crop. One of the things when I went out on August the 6th, these are both the single row plots. The one on the left, August 6th, it looked not sparse, but it didn't look super heavy. 3 days after that, we got somewhere between a 2 and a 4 inch rain. And as a result, whatever had germinated there took right off, and you end up getting this beautiful lush growth that we see on October the 27th. So it was absolutely beautiful to walk by, a nice density there. They were able to follow that right through to harvest. And there's a beautiful shot of the established cover crop. It looks beautiful. It would be able to capture some of that nitrogen that was not used by the corn crop, so there's kind of a catch crop aspect to it. In terms of trafficability, this fall happened to be really good in terms of having good conditions for harvesting, not too dry, not too wet. But in certain wet years, having that cover crop there to improve the combine trafficability and the grain buggy trafficability would play more of a role than it did this year. So another value of the cover crops. Now back to the twin row. Again, we were able to get a good establishment, both of the corn and of the cover crop. On the left-hand side, you can clearly see that you can row the cover crops. We got a decent seeding on it, right from one end of the plot to the other. And on the right-hand side, this was September. You're able to see, again, dominantly annual ryegrass, but you can row it there as well. So we are able to, both methodologies this year, we're able to get a good establishment. In drier years, I'm going to suggest the drill would probably be more successful, but this year it didn't make that much of a difference. Here's a video that we're going to talk about some of the challenges here. One of the tricks is just making sure that we get all of the seed openers lined up so you're not trampling anything, you're not cutting it off. The trampling doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. You can see that it is trampling a little bit here, but you can also see it looks like it'll stand up. The odd one gets taken out, but by and large, that's the best way. If we can go easy on this one, then we've got a good one here, 2 good ones here, and 2 good ones over here. So with this JD 750 drill that we've got here, that seems to be the trick. So that is one of the challenges of how do you go about actually running that drill over the row without trampling or minimizing the trampling. Some folks had suggested that you can go diagonal across the field. We didn't try that, but it certainly is an option. We did not do any equipment modifications. I know some folks, if they were going to try this with their drill, they would try just lifting a couple of the units, so we don't have some of the same issues of running right down the corn row. So trampling was certainly one of the challenges, at least I believed it was going to be one of the challenges. And here we're going to show another quick video just to see how it played out. So in some cases, we just can't seem to get it right. It's beautiful there, here, it took out nearly every row. Some of them are just knocked over. Some of them are cut right off, but some of them are just brushed over, even though the row is only an inch over from it. So we'll make some adjustments and see where we go. This photo on the left where some of the worst damage is, that's what the corn looked like on the right photo. So that's the sort of population that it knocked it down to. So in some of those cases, it took out probably half the plants. We planted 6 acres of this, and I'm going to suggest there were 6 to 7 areas in the field, maybe 30, 40 feet long each. So we're probably only talking maybe 200 to 300 feet over that 6 acres. So it wasn't as big of an issue as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be bad, probably wasn't going to be, ended up not being much worse than just a family of raccoons going through there at the wrong time. So something to be aware of anyway. One of the proof that the seed openers and the seeding did not necessarily do any damage to the corn is the photo on the left. And you can see that the seed openers where they dropped the seed was right in the corn row, like right dead center on the corn row. And you can see from this photo that the corn was not damaged. So the corn can be fairly robust at that particular stage. I'm going to say it was V4 at the one side, maybe it was V5, and maybe that taller corn was a little less robust. So probably if you erred on the side of caution, V3 to V4, the corn is probably more able to compensate for that. Slide on the right is just a little bit of a detour. When this particular corn was sliced off, it seemed like if you walked it over, it stood back up without too much issues. If you nipped off the end of the leaf, that didn't seem to make much difference. It's only when you nipped the corn right off at the base that it seemed to be a problem. And so when I went out to investigate the extent of the damage, this is one of the things I found. So this was the corn, and it was in a three-way battle with 3 different earthworms in 3 different holes. Simultaneously, there was this 3-way tug of war, each trying to drag the remnants of that corn down into its burrow. Never seen that before, so I thought I would share that. One of the other bigger challenges was at the one site, the twin or the single row with the Prim Extra and Callista did a very good job of weed control throughout the whole project. The site with the 2 applications of glyphosate didn't do as well. This was an example. The corn did get through the critical weed-free period with no weeds. So it was not a big issue. So what you're seeing here was a result of the 3rd flush of weeds. Again, one of the contributing factors was probably that they were very well fertilized. Remember that we broadcast 200 pounds. And the reason we broadcast 200 pounds was we wanted to make sure that we weren't starving the corn in 60-inch rows unduly. So we wanted to make sure we had a high enough rate. Well, because we broadcast it, then clearly there's probably a lot of over-fertilized weeds in the middle, and you run into the risk of under-fertilized corn. We didn't see any signs of nitrogen starvation, but there may have been some, and maybe that may have contributed to some of the yield challenges. On the right-hand side, you can see where some of that weeds did not completely take over, but it was not what we think of as a desirable weed-free corn. I'm still kind of tossed about how bad this particular is. The benefits of the cover crop is to help promote and improve the root biomass. And the root biomass in this particular plot was far superior to anything that I've seen. It did not come from our intended cover crop, it came from our volunteer cover crop, the weeds. But one of the things that I need to keep in mind is the cover crops roots provide all that goodness that they provide depending on how much volume of biomass, root biomass that you have, and how long it is that those roots are pushing the root exudates out into the rhizosphere, the area around the root. And that's where some of the good stuff is. And you can see from this particular plot on the right-hand side, there will be a ton of root biomass. And because it was started so early, the whole season, essentially, it'll be pumping those root exudates out into the field. So it's hard to always quantify really the value of those, the root biomass as a result of the cover crop. And we're going to follow this through next year to see if we can see what the benefit of that extra root biomass was. This carried right through to harvest. We were able to get the crop off in decent shape because of the conditions. In the 60-inch corn, in a single row, the corns were observed to be a little smaller than average, partly due to probably pressure one plant to the next plant. In the 60-inch, the twin row, where it was a lower population, we ended up having these monster cobs, sometimes frequently doubles on the stalk, and just huge cobs. It looked like it was going to be a phenomenal yield. The problem was there just weren't enough of them to make up the difference. And I'll go through the yield hit there just in a minute. The bottom center right, you can see that, yes, there was a cover crop establishment fairly well there. It's comparable. This is the twin row site. It is comparable to the single row site in terms of establishment. So lessons learned. So one of the things that we learned is, certainly, even though we didn't nail it perfectly, the corn and cover crops can both be produced just with existing equipment that most farmers already have. We did notice that for the most part, the various components of the trials yielded 150 to 180 bushel. On an average year, 180 bushel wouldn't be much of a crop to turn your nose up at. But because this was a phenomenal year and the 30-inch yield was phenomenal, we ended up having with a drag of 40 to 60 bushel over the field, the rest of the field average, which was the 30-inch corn. So could that be improved? Population, we could play around with the population. You could play around with better nitrogen management. And I think between those two, we can probably reduce that drag somewhat. How much, anybody's guess. The literature tends to say there's still usually a 10 to 15% yield drag, so another 20 to 30 bushels. So something to be aware of anyway. One of the things that I think I understand is that the 60-inch corn is more vulnerable. It's more vulnerable because it's not having access to as much soil matrix. And so rainfall, there are moisture deficits that the rainfall will cause. Again, this year, it wasn't a big deal because we got timely rains. In other years, when you have more issues, it's going to be a drier issue, a drier year, it's going to be more of an issue. So of course, that has issues with the precision nitrogen applications. If you're looking at being able to drop something right onto or adjacent to the corn row, you're going to have better luck than we did just broadcasting. As always, weed management is important, doubly important with the 60-inch corn, because when you open up that canopy, not only do the cover crops grow, but the weeds can also grow if you don't have your weeds under control. The establishment wasn't as bad this year as I thought it might. The drill didn't create much in the way of damage this year. Was there some? Yes, but I don't think it was that particular. If I was going to do it again, I'd probably go with it again just because the broadcasting is so susceptible to reduced germination. And the final thing we need to point out, and I've touched on it briefly, these cover crops it's difficult to quantify. So yeah, we got a good crop of weeds or cover crop, but the actual benefits is difficult to assess just from one particular year, one season and whatnot. So we know that they do good, and we'll want to continue to keep being aware of that. One last thing that I want to share with you, next week there's a Midwest Cover Crop Council conference. This is the URL here, www.mcc.msu.edu, and there's a link on that to go register for it. It's next Wednesday, Thursday. These are some of the topics, just to as a bit of a teaser. Some of them talks about the money saving the farm. There's cash flow. They want to talk about soil biology. And some of the seminars go into dealing with grain crops, veggies, and livestock. So there's a little bit of information there for everyone. I'm going to end it right there. There's my contact information, either by phone or by email. If you don't end up remembering what my email address is, by all means, just get a hold of Hope. Her contact information was on the original invite to the cover crop, and she'll be able to get you in contact with me. So want to just finally thank everyone for viewing this video, for actually taking part in this our annual, about our 6th annual cover crop workshop. Appreciate it, all the efforts that you farmers have gone to in terms of promoting and using cover crops, and we hope to continue this in the future.